Welcome to Korg's ultimate expression of where all music workstations have been heading. A single instrument that has everything you need to take your ideas from inception to final audio CD. Part synthesizer, sequencer, resampler, remix tool, effect powerhouse, mastering tool. It's the only instrument that encompasses all the functionality needed to seamlessly make, mix, and master your musical ideas. In this video tutorial, we'll discover how each of these personalities of your Triton Studio come together in an easy-to-use and musically inspiring keyboard. This tutorial has been designed to quickly get you up and running on your new Triton Studio, so some sections may not cover some of the more intricate functions in order to best equip you in the shortest possible time. If you are interested in learning even more about your Triton Studio, check out the information on the end of this tape regarding the Master Series video training tape. So, let's begin. Let's begin by making the connections. Plug your Triton Studio into the proper AC power source and connect the left and right outputs to your monitoring system. With the volume slider all the way down, power up the instrument and the screen will briefly show some information regarding the current operating system, installed expansion options, and then drop you down into this page. The touchscreen is central to the Triton Studio and the front panel can be broken down into a number of sections. To the left of the screen we have our real-time controls here to make changes to your sound in real time. Now, in addition to these, we also have real-time controllers in the forms of switches, joystick, and the ribbon controller down here next to the lower keys. Immediately to the right of the real-time controller knobs are the mode keys, which place you in any mode you wish to be in. For instance, the sequencer mode for recording and editing songs, or the disk mode to load or save files. To the left and the right-hand side of the screen, we have the value controllers that allow you to change the value of the selected parameter on the screen, including selecting sounds. You can use the value dial, up and down keys, or the numeric keypad to change the currently highlighted item. On the right-hand side of the instrument, we have a number of different sections. The first is for selecting the banks of programs or combinations. Then there's a sequencer transport section here for starting, stopping, locating, and recording sequences. An arpeggiator section for adjusting the dual arpeggiators with such things as tempo, gate, and velocity with an on-off key here. And finally, a couple of sampling keys for arming and recording samples. Most of your work, however, will be done on the touch screen central to the front panel. If you want to adjust its contrast, there's a knob on the rear panel. Let's take a quick example of how to get around this screen by looking at the default one that we power up to, and that's the combination play page. Well, much has been said about the Triton Studio's lightning fast processor. What does that mean to you and me? Virtually instant access to anything on the screen just by touching the screen with your finger. Now, there are a number of things on the screen that are able to be changed and some that are just for information only. For example, pressing on the name of the combination highlights it and enables you to change it using the up and down keys, value dial, or the numeric keypad. There are pop-up menus here with arrows and sliders, even screens that have checkboxes and radio buttons. The difference between checkboxes and radio buttons is that radio buttons only accept one choice, where you can check multiple checkboxes. The best way to move around the screen is to use the tip of your finger rather than the pad. There are a number of pages within each mode of the Triton Studio and they're all listed underneath the menu key. So you start out by selecting a mode, you'll then be brought to a menu page and you can move along the tabs on the bottom of the screen. To choose a different menu page, press the menu key and make your selection here. For example, we could press Sequencer to get into sequencer mode, press Menu, select, say, Track Edit. Then I could move over to the Track Names page using the tab on the bottom of the screen. You can then use the Exit key to take you back out of the pages that you went down into. In the upper right-hand corner of the screen, we have our Page Menu button. This gives us options that are specific to a page that we're on, just like a drop-down menu on a word processor. Now, there are many different variables on each different page here, but instead of getting bogged down in all the detail now, let's explore the Triton Studio and discover them as we look at each section. But before we do, let's quickly show you how to install the CD writer if you have this option. Power down the instrument and remove the AC cable. Remove the bay cover from your Triton Studio and place the CD writer in this way with the labels face up. Slide it in until you hear the click. Power back up and make sure that the drive is listed under the options on the Power Up screen. Before discussing the program mode, let's quickly look at an overview of the sound making engine of the Triton Studio. At its core, the Triton Studio makes sounds from its internal wave ROM, user samples in RAM, or the MOS DSP synth engine if installed. These programs are arranged in banks, each one holding 128 programs. Selecting a program can be done in a number of ways. First, make sure you are in program mode by pressing its key. Then you can press the pop-up button just to the left of its name. Here you can see all of the banks represented as tabs along the left and the right-hand side of the screen. Simply select a tab and select any of the 128 different choices within that bank. You can use the slider bar or arrows here to move around within that bank and even audition the sound complete with Arpeggiator while it's selected. Once you're happy with your selection, press OK and you come back to the program play page. If you wish, you can use the bank keys and numeric keypad to select a program. Just type the number and enter. You may use the up and down keys if you wish, but you'll notice that the value slider doesn't scroll through them. That's because this slider can be set up to be a controller, just like the real-time knobs or ribbon slider. A great way to select programs is by using instrument categories. To do this, press the category pop-up button at the top of the screen. Now the programs are presented in groups of categories along the sides instead of banks. They're the same programs, just organized in categories for easy selection. That way you could scroll through, say, your keyboards or your organs, brass or guitars, and this makes finding the right sound extremely easy and very quick. Actually, while we're looking through the programs here, take time to check out the amazing new stereo velocity switch grand piano that's in C001. This huge 16 megabyte multi-sample grand piano is brand new to the Triton series and has its own 60 voices of polyphony. More on that later. Once you've decided on a program to play, you can always tweak it a little bit if it's not exactly what you want. The lower portion of the screen shows 8 sliders in the performance editor. Each of these sliders allows adjustments to be made relative to their stored positions. For example, if I was to take the next program up, sample and hold here, and I wanted to change the octave, just press the octave button here and use the up and down keys to transpose up and down octaves. Similarly, you can use these sliders here to adjust the amount of effects on the program. Play with the oscillator balance to hear the 2 elements that make up the sound. You can adjust the attack and decay of the sound along with other parameters here. But sometimes you just want to grab a physical knob and tweak its sound. Well, the Triton Studio has a row of 4 knobs here that have up to 8 functions just by toggling the select key here. They can either be the preset parameters listed right here, such as low pass filter cutoff, resonance, EG intensity, and envelope release. And then with the press of a key, they can be assigned parameters that can be set per program. By looking at this screen here, we can see that as we scroll through our various programs, there are different assignments for each of these knobs and switches. If you want to make changes to these assignments, press Menu and Page 1 and move over to the Controller tab. As you select various programs, you may notice that the Arpeggiator key will be on or off depending on what has been set up in the program. All programs have an arpeggio assigned to them, but they may not wake up with it set to on. Let's select C54, wah space bass. Check out how the Arpeggiator key is not lit, but if we press it, we have a cool arpeggio effect for the program. Let's adjust the 3 arpeggio knobs here. Tempo is self-explanatory. It adjusts the speed of the arpeggiator in real time. Gate adjusts the length, and velocity, the loudness of the arpeggiated notes. If you're interested in selecting a different arpeggio pattern, press the Arpeggiator tab and select from the list here. This page also has a number of controls of how the arpeggiator will play. The third tab along the bottom here is labeled Sampling. This is where you access the controls to be able to sample new audio or to resample the program that you're playing. We'll be covering this exciting feature later on in this video. Pressing the menu key gives us a choice of 9 pages that are accessible by pressing them either directly on the screen or by typing the number of the page right on the numeric keypad. The default page numbered 0 is play, and this is the one that we've been looking at up until now. You can see that we have, underneath the menu key, we have 8 more pages dedicated to editing, some for filter, amp, arpeggiator and effects. Once you do any editing of your own, you can use the dedicated compare key to recall the original program before you started editing. This way you can A/B your changes and decide which one you'd rather keep. If you wish to update the program to reflect your changes, just press Record Write, and the screen will ask you whether you wish to overwrite the program that you're working on. If you decide to write to another location, we can cancel out of that, and from the page menu, we can select Write Program. You then have the freedom to place the newly edited version in any bank and any location. You can place it anywhere you want, possibly in internal bank E or in EXB banks A through G. Here are some examples of some cool programs that you can explore on your own. Pressing the Combi key will take you into this page, our combination play page, and you'll be pretty familiar with much of what we've seen in the program play page. We can select combinations by category or scroll through by banks. But the question you're probably asking yourself is, what is a combination? A combination is a mix of up to 8 programs split or layered across the keyboard. You could have a bass on your left hand and a piano on your right, like A113 bass and whirly split. Or piano and strings layered on top of each other, like A047 piano and strings. You can even have programs layered on top of each other with different velocity ranges, such as A059 Dyno Orchestra. You can see that only when I hit my left hand heavy do I bring in the timpani. So that's what this page is showing us here, a listing of up to 8 different timbres or programs that can be used within this one combination. Selecting combinations is just like selecting programs like we did a moment ago in the program section of this tutorial. You can select by category by pressing the category button, and you'll notice that there are different category names here to reflect what you can do with these more powerful splits and layers. And of course you can always select the combis by bank, and also using the bank keys, numeric keypad and enter key to select them directly. I'm going to select number 14 here and hit OK. If you want to replace any of the 8 timbres within a combination, you can do it by category of programs or by banks of programs. Let's take the second timbre here, which is kind of a lead sound. I'll start this combination going. That's what's assigned to the second timbre here, and I can go ahead and try something else. And of course we're just auditioning these sounds until we hit OK, and now that has been loaded in here. You can also see which timbres are active and which ones are turned off. The next tab allows us to mix each timbre's pan and volume, and if you ever want to zero in on any one timbre, like if I'm playing this lead sound, I can select it, and then underneath the page menu I can solo selected timbre. Now you can hear just that selected timbre. Do you remember how programs had an arpeggiator? Well, combinations have two, as found underneath Arpeggiator A and Arpeggiator B. They have the same features but are independent. As you can see, A has this arpeggiator pattern called up, and B has this guy here. You can also see how each of them are playing different timbres. You can turn either on or off by selecting these checkboxes here, and keep in mind that neither will play unless you have the arpeggiator key set to on. You can set the resolution here and also the octave span of the arpeggiator, along with some options of how the arpeggiator will play from the keyboard. If sort is checked, the notes will be arranged in the order of their pitch, not in the order in which you played them. Latch will have the arpeggiated notes continue to play when you release your hand from the keyboard. Key sync on will always retrigger the ARP pattern from the top whenever you play a new note. This is useful if you ever want to play along with the pattern, changing your notes in between the beats. And finally, keyboard decides whether the notes you play will sound in addition to the arpeggiated notes. Of course, all the controllers here are available in Combi mode as well. Just grab a knob and create. The Triton Studio has more than enough voices to enable complex layering of programs within a combination. The number of voices that a synthesizer or sampler can play back at the same time is called its polyphony, and the Triton Studio, being several instruments in one, has an incredible number of voices that it can play back at one time. We have 60 voices of polyphony from the bass ROM sounds and sample RAM, and a further 60 from the new piano ROM and EXB PCM boards. Furthermore, if you add the MOS DSP synth engine, you'll add another 6 voices of unbelievable synth and physically modeled sounds that are independent of the 120 above. This is an amazing number of voices that can help you when creating combinations or while sequencing. Just like we found in program mode, we can call up a number of pages by pressing the menu key just to the right of the screen. Page 1, Edit Program Mixer, allows you to select the program assigned to each timbre as well as adjusting their pan and their volume here. Number 2, Edit Track Parameter, allows you to set each timbre to play either its own internal program, turn it off, or to play an external MIDI device. You can set the MIDI channels for each timbre to transmit and receive on. If you tab over to Oscillator, you can make some decisions on what oscillators will play across each timbre. This is handy if you want to limit the polyphony of a program while in combination, or to maybe isolate elements of a program for creative applications. The pitch tab allows both coarse and fine control of the pitch of each timbre along with its bend range here, while the other tab allowing for delays between each timbre and scale selection. The MIDI screens give you a number of filters to enable certain MIDI parameters and filter out others. The Edit Zone control page has a few tabs along the bottom here to do with the splitting of the keyboard across this way, and also with regards to velocity, that's how hard you hit the keys. So for instance, you could set the top key of timbre number 1 by highlighting it here and using the value slider or the dial, or you can use the handy shortcut where you hold down the Enter key and press any key on the keyboard. You'll find that pretty much anywhere where you see a field with keys as the value here, you can use this trick. Just hold down Enter while pressing a key on the keyboard. You can set velocity zones right here so that you can switch or fade between timbres depending on how hard you hit the keyboard. You also have control over the MOS synth engine if you have it installed, and finally the settings for the assignable knobs and switches. Page 7, Edit Arpeggiator, allows us to assign an arpeggiator to each specific timbre with also a more detailed view of each arpeggiator's settings. The last tab, Scan Zone here, allows for defining a key span and also a velocity range so that you can have each arpeggiator play only within these zones. There are two effect edit screens here, one for the insert effects and one for the master effects and EQ. Let's get an understanding of the difference between these two guys using the following graphic. The Triton Studio has an unprecedented number of effects, up to 7 at the same time, and they are configured much like you would find in a recording studio. First, there are the insert effects, and there are 5 of them. They can be used independently or chained together as desired to help create the sound you want for each timbre. Additionally, we have 2 master effects which are configured like a typical effects loop where you can send differing amounts of any given timbre to them with adjustable return level just as you'd expect. So master effects can be treated like an overall sound treatment to be shared by multiple timbres to unify your mix. Let's look at the insert effects first. From the routing tab on this page, you decide whether a sound goes to the main outputs, with send amounts to the master effects if desired, into any of the 5 insert effects, or directly to any individual output. So we'll assign this timbre to IFX1 for example, and once you've assigned that, you'll see that reflected on this graphic on the top of the screen. Once you've made this assignment, then you can go to the next tab and press the pop-up button next to the desired IFX here and select from the list of effects which are even categorized on these tabs on the side. You can do that for all of these insert effects, even chaining these guys together if you need. Next, you can decide the output panning of the effect and even route the signal to an individual output if desired. Leaving it onto left and right allows you to then use the master effects as well. And here's where you can send the output of the effect into either of the master effects. If you do chain any of these guys together, you'll need to go to the last one within this chain to make these adjustments here. And the remaining tabs are for in-depth editing of the selected effects. The master effects page gives you a choice of effects that are categorized, chainable, and finally processed by the master 3-band EQ before coming out of the left and right outputs here. The remaining tabs along the bottom here are for in-depth editing of each master effect and finally the EQ. Here are some examples of some cool combinations that you can explore on your own. Entering sequencer mode will place you into this page where you have a 16-track sequencer showing 8 tracks on the screen at a time. You'll notice that the tabs along the bottom here are set up in groups of 8, like the programs 1 through 8, and then 9 through 16. then the mixer settings for the first 8 tracks, and then 9 through 16. You have 200 song locations to record into, and like I said, within each of these songs you have 16 tracks along with a master track for recording tempo and meter changes. As you can see, each track can be assigned a program here, either by category or by bank. But a far better way to set up for recording is by using the song templates. You're not going to be able to believe how quick it is to be set up here. Go ahead and press the page menu button and select Load Template Song. We have 16 preset configurations and a further 16 user programmable song templates. And these are almost like a producer coming in and assembling the perfect band for you, given any genre of music. For our example, let's go back to the first one and select Pop Ballad, and we'll copy some preset drum patterns too. This page pops up and gives us a choice of hundreds of drum patterns, but it's neat because it drops us perfectly in the patterns that are suited for the genre we selected. In this case, it was Pop Ballad here. By pressing Start and Stop, you can audition these before you lay them down into your drum track. Now I'm going to start out with this first pattern here and press OK. And you can see that the pattern has been placed in, and it's obviously an 8 measure pattern because we are now placed at the top of measure 9. Now just because it's an 8 measure pattern doesn't mean that we have to play it all the way through. Let's highlight this measure here and we'll hit 5 and enter. Now the next pattern I place in will start from measure 5. Let's select the next pattern here and we can audition that. Cool, and we'll hit OK. And we can audition the next guy. Great, we can drop that in and you can keep on doing that as long as you like. Okay, I'm done here. Let's go ahead and hit exit. Now that was less than a minute's work, but let me show you what your Triton Studio has just done for you. It has named the song, the genre you chose, and it has given these tracks meaningful names rather than just track 1, track 2 and so on. It's also, let me get out of here, placed the perfect instrument on each track, which of course you could change if you wish, but it's placed all those drum patterns into our first track, add drums. It's a lot of work and it's all done that seamlessly for you. Let's hit Start and Stop and you can see that our first pattern is playing and it's going to change at the top of bar 5. Remember, it was just a 4 measure. Here we go. Comes in with a bit of a shaker there. Cool. Now normally we would have to assemble the right instruments, name our tracks, program drums. That takes a lot of time exactly at the time when you want to be creating, not wading through a bunch of menus and pages. Song templates rock. And of course, they're just as useful if you're using an external sequencer to record as well. Okay, so we have a drum part all placed in there. Let's add a bass part. So we'll select the second track, which has been conveniently named as bass, and it also has a cool bass program in there as well. Of course, if you wanted to try another bass, just press the category here and you're conveniently placed in the bass category here, and you can audition different basses. I'm going to go with the original one, so I'll press cancel here. If you did start to make up new assignments for each track and you wanted to save that so that you could use that as another song template, of course you can always save song templates here. And remember, you have 16 different user locations to place them in there. I'll go ahead and hit cancel there. Back to recording. You can go over to the Preferences tab here if you want to change the metronome setting here or the record mode. Let's just leave all of this as is and go back to the first tab here. Okay, press Locate to get back to the top, record, and Start Stop. Here we go. Cool, let's play that back. Now, a lot of pop songs can be pretty repetitive in nature, so let's use the play loop function to give our bass player a hand. Tab over to the first play loop tab here and set our bass track, track 2 here, to loop on with a start of measure 1 till the end of measure 4. Now, if you were to select any range that didn't start at measure 1, you'll be given the choice of whether to start or play directly from that point there, or by checking play intro here, you can have the track play up to that point and then start looping. Okay, let's take that off and go back to number 1. Great, if I hit locate and start, it's going to just keep on looping around for those first 4 measures just for my bass part. Here we go, get ready to loop, and it goes back around. Great. The only trouble is my timing's not that great. Let's clean up this track with one of the track edits, Quantize. Press Menu, and we'll get into Track Edit, page 5. You can see a graphical representation of each of the measures here that we've recorded across all of the tracks. Now, we've only recorded into the first 2 tracks. Here's all our drum measures that we recorded or we laid down in the form of patterns when we created the song. And here's our bass line just beneath it. Highlight the start from measure here, and we'll hit 1 and enter. And then what we're going to do here is we're about to edit track 2 up here over these number of measures. And of course, you're free to change the track or the measures easily from this page. Once we've selected what we're going to edit, then we select what we're going to do with that by pressing the page menu button. Look at all of the editing options offered here. In this case, I'm going to clean up the timing by selecting Quantize up here. It's telling us we're quantizing in track 2 over these measures, and you can even define the range down here and edit down to the beat or tick if you like. I'd like to quantize everything here and give it a resolution of, say, quarter notes. We'll hit OK. I've lost half my notes. Obviously, the resolution was too coarse. Well, no problem. Press Compare, and we're back to the way things were before I did my bad edit. So Compare can be used as a form of undo. Cool. Let's try it again, but this time with a resolution of 16th notes. Quantize, but now we'll do this as 16th notes. Okay, that's more like it. You'll find the Compare key is a great benefit if you ever make a mistake in editing. Okay, let's locate back to the beginning of the song and hit Exit and go back to the main recording page. Okay, it's time for a guitar track, and you're going to love the use of the Arpeggiator while we record. Go ahead and hit the guitar track here. Number 4, acoustic guitar. We already have a nice guitar sound coming up here, but this time we're going to turn Arpeggiator on. Go ahead and locate to the beginning of the song, record right, and start stop. Have the countdown, and we're going to have instant strummed guitars. Hit start stop there. We'll go ahead and locate, and we'll turn the Arpeggiator off and play that back. How cool is that? But let's imagine you want to try a different guitar program, but you like what you played in. Easy. Let's go ahead and locate, start and stop, and we'll hit the category of track 4 here. You can audition through a whole warehouse of guitars. Let's go ahead and select funking guitar here, and sounds pretty cool. Great, using the techniques that we've gone through, you can add more and more tracks here just by selecting this guy here. And later on, we'll be able to add live audio and even burn a CD. More on that later. While we're here, the Preferences tab shows you that in addition to the real-time recording we've done up till now, we can also overdub and even do loop recording here. The Triton Studio can even perform step recording if desired. Now, many times you'll go through some combinations and they'll have drum patterns and arpeggios that are excellent for song ideas. Only trouble is, in sequence land, you bring up programs here, not combis, right? Well, I guess if you were resourceful, you could break down a combination going back here, and to see which programs it's comprised of, notate which arpeggios it uses, write it all down on a piece of paper, and rebuild it some way into your song. It seems like a lot of work. Well, combinations have always been such a great starting point for songs. We've developed a way to copy them into a song. Press Sequencer, and we'll select a new song here. Go ahead and press OK here. And from the page menu, select Copy from Combi. From this menu, you can select any combination you like. Let's go ahead and hit Sneak in here. Hit OK. Check off whether you want to bring over the effects. And you can also decide which group of 8 tracks you want to copy to, either 1 through 8 or 9 through 16. And finally, if you check this box here, all the arpeggio settings and MIDI channels will be set up for multi-track recording to faithfully reproduce this combi in the sequencer. Now, if you don't understand what is about to take place under the hood here, just trust me when I say that some major housekeeping is done when you check this box to make sure that your combination and its arpeggios are recorded correctly. Hit OK here. Now we have all of those tracks laid out with the correct programs. The Arpeggiator button is turned on, just like the combi. The tempo is brought over, and you'll also notice that underneath the Preferences tab, multi-record is set up, which means, as you can see, tracks 1 through 8 are set to record at the same time. Let's go ahead and record. Record right and start. 2, 2, 3, 4. Okay, go ahead and hit Start, Stop again, locate, and everything has been recorded, just like it was in the combination. Great, now if you want to record even more tracks here, you can just go and set these guys to playback and go to tracks 9 through 16 here, and you can set these guys to record, and you can keep on adding tracks. A great way to create songs on the fly is by using the real-time pattern play recording, or as we affectionately call it, Rppr or Rppr. I've loaded up a factory sequence from the internal hard drive called Midnight Sun that uses Rppr, and you'll notice that we have a bunch of one-key patterns available right from the keyboard. Go ahead and press Menu and page 6, our pattern Rppr. The Triton Studio has 150 preset patterns and a further 100 user programmable ones that you can place either into tracks here, or you can place them onto keys underneath this tab here, Rppr Setup. Highlight the key that you want to be checking out, and you can go up and down the keyboard using the value dial, and you can see which pattern is being assigned to which track down here, what track it will play. You can even use our Enter key trick to go directly to a key. Hold down Enter and hit middle C. You can see that the middle C key is playing this pattern into the program that's in this track here. If you like, you can assign this to a different track, and you can hear it. It's now playing the program that's on that track. You can assign up to 72 keys, with the bottom C down here being set up as a stop key to stop all of the patterns. Go back to the main sequencer page, and as long as the Rppr checkbox is checked, you can play or record these patterns in real time. Now, if you want to record them, make sure that multi-record is checked in the Preferences tab down here, because remember that all the keys may be playing different tracks. Once you have created a few songs, you can chain them together in what is called a cue list. In fact, if you've loaded up some of these factory songs here, there's a cue list already set up to play all of these demos back to back. Press Menu and Cue List, and here's where they are all queued up. There are 20 cue lists available, and what they do quite simply is just allow you to chain play up to 99 songs. You have the option of setting repeats for each song or step, and whether or not you wish to load their effects. Now obviously this might be good as a jukebox, playing all of your tunes back as a medley, but if you think of songs just as sections of a tune that you're working on, you could set up these songs, say one as an intro, one as a verse, another as a chorus, a bridge, outro, etc. Then arrange your tune easily by bringing up these sections in your cue list. This is where the Triton Studio gives you the best of both worlds, both back here on the first page, both linear style song sequencing in this sequencer pages here, and also drum machine or chunk style arranging if you're familiar with some software-based sequences. You even have the opportunity to convert this finished cue list back into a new linear song, where we go here, convert to song, coming full circle. And by the way, if you're linking up lining up verses and choruses right next to each other, then it's recommended to only load up the effects at the very beginning so that you don't get any hiccups in the loading of the effects between songs. As you can imagine, there's a lot more features and functionality in the Triton Studio sequencer in terms of patterns, advanced editing, Rppr and so on. Look for the Master Series video to give you the lowdown. Pressing Disk gets you into the disks mode of your Triton Studio with access to all of your drives down here. First up is your floppy disk, followed by the 7 Scuzzy addresses for any drives connected to the Scuzzy connector on your rear panel. Then you have your internal 5 GB drive is next on the list, followed with the CD-RW 1x8 drive will come up here if you have that installed. So the first thing we do in disk mode is select the drive that we are going to read from or write to. Let's go ahead and select the internal hard drive. Now, the Triton Studio uses the folder analogy, which is central to any Windows or Mac-based computer. It's just an excellent way to organize your data. So for example, let's select the factory folder right here and press Open. We are now looking at the subfolder within the directory folder. Select any subfolder in here and we can hit Open again. So now we are looking at some of the factory sequences, and you'll probably recognize some of the song names here. To move back out of folders and up to the previous folder, press Up. Now there are a number of files that can be saved on a disk. Here's a brief explanation of them. PCG folders stand for Program, Combi, and Global. In other words, a PCG folder holds all of the data for the programs, combinations, and global information, which includes your drum kits and Arpeggiator information. Song, or the SNG folders, stand for songs. They contain all of the info to do with sequences and cue lists and Rppr. KSC stands for Korg script, and it's a list of everything that was saved when you save all sample data so that they can easily be reloaded. All of the data that this script references is in the folder directly below it. With all of these 3 folders here and this script file, we have a complete backup of your Triton Studio at any point in time. Now here's how to back up what's on your Triton Studio right now. Let's navigate to the top level, go up here, and in the Utility tab down here, we'll select Create Directory. Let's go ahead and hit the T here and clear and put in TEST and OK. Say OK again. And now we have a folder to back up all of our data. Tab over to the Save page and we'll go down into this folder by opening it. We're now about to save within this test folder. Go ahead and press the Page menu. You can see that we have a choice of all these different types of data that we can save. Let's play it safe and press Save All. And we'll name this data. We'll name it My data. Okay. And you can see that we are saving actually a bunch of stuff all at the same time. Programs, combis, drum kits, ARPs, along with songs and samples and even global settings down here. We've got them all. Hit OK and it's all being written into the hard drive. If we wanted to reload all of the factory data, press the Load tab here, navigate to the factory folder and press Open. Select the PCG file here and from the page menu, let's select Load Selected. You can load the songs and the samples along with a choice as to whether you're going to either append, that's adding to, or clear, that's overwriting these songs and samples. Let's clear the existing songs and samples and we're ready to wipe the slate clean and reset the Triton Studio to its factory settings. Now obviously you wouldn't do this if you had songs or samples that weren't saved yet. Great, we're now back to square one. If you've invested in an internal CDRW or connected an external CDRW drive via Scuzzy, let's quickly look at how to format a CDR and save some data. Go ahead and place a CDR in the drive and press Disk. Select the CD drive from the drive list here and go to the Utility tab. Under the page menu, select Format. You can name the disk if you like here, otherwise just press OK and OK. This quick format will take about a minute. Once the format is complete, the CDR just comes up just like your hard disk here. Here's the internal hard disk here, and here's your new CD volume. Now you can save any data you'd like to the CDR. It's an inexpensive and virtually indestructible form of media, and I highly recommend you invest in it. The open sampling system allows you to perform sampling and resampling in any mode you need, whenever you want. Imagine sampling a combination using the dual arpeggiators and making your own loops. Being able to sample using the Triton Studio vocoder. Being able to sample sections of your songs to reuse tracks, polyphony and effects. Resampling sections of your songs or loops to be triggered as Rppr patterns for live performance, and perhaps one of the most exciting applications, in-track sampling. That means that the sequencer no longer just records MIDI performances. You can drop guitar tracks, vocals, real-time turntable scratches, anything you'd like right in time with sequence tracks. All sampling is done within the sample RAM memory or directly to the internal hard disk. The Triton Studio comes with 16 megabytes of RAM already installed, or you could expand sample memory up to 96 megabytes by installing 3 32 megabyte SIM modules. We sample through any of the inputs installed on the rear of the Triton Studio, our analog stereo pair, SPDIF, optional MLAN if installed, or directly from the CD drive if installed. When using the analog inputs, we have a mic line switch and an input trim to adjust the level of signal coming into the sampler. While we can now access sampling in any of these three modes, in combination mode, the tab down here, program mode, the tab down here, and in sequencer mode, the tab down here, we can begin to learn sampling within its own mode. So press sampling and you'll come to a page like this that will show you all of the samples laid out across the keyboard in what we call a multi-sample. Now I've just started the Triton Studio up without loading any samples, so all 1,000 locations here for the multi-samples, they're all empty right now. I'll explain the relationship between samples, multi-samples, and the file types that you need to save to disk in just a moment. But first, let's get our feet wet with a quick example. And let me warn you, the next few screens here may seem to be a fair amount of setup, but once made, you can really fly through recording a bunch of samples. The first page here has to do with where the sample will be recorded, either to RAM or to disk, mono or stereo. You can also see where the sample's key range is going to be, along with the original key. That's the key that will play back the sample in its original pitch. Let's go to Input Setup. This is where we decide what we're going to use as our input. I'm going to use the analog input here. and we can adjust the level and the pan of the input and where it's going to. So it's possible to sample through insert effects if desired. Let's go ahead and select left, right, and you'll notice that down here we decide where we're going to sample from. It defaults to left and right too, so do you see the signal flow? Our input goes to the left-right bus, which in turn goes into the sampler. When I press record to arm the sampler, you can see the level coming up here on the screen. It's panned all the way over to the left, so that's why we're seeing it on the left. Let's go ahead and highlight this pan here and hit 64 and enter. Now it's coming up both sides here. Now if the screen shows ADC overload up here, back off on the gain knob on the rear panel. You'll notice that with the record light on, many of these parameters are grayed out. Let's disarm the sampler for a moment, and under the recording setup here, let's select the trigger as threshold and its setting at -30 dB. Now when I set the Triton Studio to record, it will wait until a signal comes in above this threshold and then begin sampling. If I want to make sure that the very first part of the sample is caught, I can set up a pre-trigger down here of say 5 milliseconds here to catch the initial transients of the sound that I'm recording. Okay, we're ready to sample now. Let's arm the sampler, and once I press start, it will wait until I say something that will go over this threshold. Press start. Sampling. Okay, now we have a sample that will be played back at its original pitch right here, and it will go up in pitch until the end of its key range, which was set here. Now that we have set up just these couple of pages, you won't believe how quickly we can add new samples. Let's go to the Preferences tab and set the default zone range here down to 1 key. Now go back to the first tab and press Create. You can see that the next sample will be placed on the very next available key, which is C3. Press Record and Start. Is easy. That's just placed the sample onto C3. Is easy. Let's create a new zone by pressing Create. And as we said in the preferences, the very next semitone will be selected. Press Record and Start. With the. Press Create again, only this time we'll go through some internal effects as we sample. Let's go to Input Setup and route our input here into Insert Effect number 1. Press Menu and Insert Effect. Now I want to bring up an echo effect, so let's go to the Insert Effects here. And you can see why we're not hearing anything yet. There's nothing assigned here. Let's turn the Insert Effect 1 on and press just the left of it, and we can select what type of effect we want. I want an echo effect, so we'll go through some of these guys, and you can, hey, 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 check. You can audition right from here. Perhaps we'll use this guy here. Hit record and start stop. Triton Studio. As you can see back here, we have 4 zones here. The first with a wide key span, the last 3 with just a single key as their span, and the last one drowning in echo. Sampling is easy with the Triton Studio. I'd better quickly show you how these samples are laid out within your Triton Studio to better help you understand how to load and to save them. The Triton Studio has up to 4,000 sample locations within it. Each of these samples can be assigned to an index across the keyboard. A collection of indexes is called a multi-sample, and the Triton Studio has up to 1,000 of them. Finally, a multi-sample is brought up within a program just like any other built-in sound. Difference is these internal sounds are in ROM and they'll stay in memory after powering down your Triton Studio. Multi-samples won't, so we need to save them. Press disk and we'll save to our CDR that we formatted earlier on in this tape, although of course this procedure that we're about to do is identical when using the internal hard disk. Under Utility, open the page menu and create a new directory. You can name it here if need be, but just for the moment, let's just leave this at new directory. Once that's written that to the CDR, let's go over to the Save tab, and we'll open up this directory because we're about to save our samples into it. Let's go to the page menu and save sampling data. And let's select all and save. Once that's done, you can see that there is a file and a folder created. The first is a KSC file, which, as we learned, is a list that will automatically reload all of the multi-samples and samples that are contained in the folder below. So an inexpensive CDR is the format that we've saved our samples to. And actually, while we're on the subject, let's see how we can use this same drive to rip samples off of CDs. Place a source CD in the drive, go into sampling mode, press Menu, and select number 5, Audio CD. From this page, select the track that you want to rip. I want to rip number 53, I believe. To be able to hear the disc, make sure you set the inputs to the left and right bus. If we go back to Menu, number 0 here on the Input Setup tab, make sure these are set to the left and right here. Now to go back into Audio CD here, this volume slider here can be used to set the playback level of the CD. Press the sequencer start-stop key to start the CD playing, and then you'll be pressing the Enter key at the start point where you want to begin ripping from. Press it again to set the end point. You'll see these locations displayed at the bottom of the screen here as you hit the Enter key. Now let's go ahead and do this heads up because it's going to be pretty quick. Starting the CD, here we go. Here's the beginning point. Now, here's the end point. Now. Okay, you can see them highlighted down here. It starts at 3.5 seconds, ends at 6.9, and it's about a 3.4 second sample. And of course, you can change these just by highlighting them down here and using the value dial if you like. Once you've selected the area that you want to rip, we need to go up here to Destination, and we can either rip this to RAM or disk. Let's leave it at RAM and hit OK, and the ripping will begin. Note that if you wanted to rip a whole track from the CD, then you'd only need to select the track and then go right to setting the destination from the page menu. Go ahead and exit, move over to the Recording tab, and here's the CD track that I just ripped. Of course, I could have done this through the analog ends through a normal CD player, but this ripping process is really quick and easy. Now let's take a sample that I've ripped and make a loop out of it using Triton Studio's powerful grid function. Press Menu and select Loop Edit. You can adjust the sample start point, the loop start point, and the loop end point. I want to loop this sample, so let's go ahead and check Loop and then select the loop end point. Now normally the way we would loop a sample on most ordinary samplers is to play around with this setting here until we have a loop that is, say, a measure long. Now this is normally a hit or miss process of just using your ears. However, I do know the BPM of this sample as I got it off of a loop CD, and in the liner notes it said this loop was 140 BPM. From the page menu, select Grid, turn it on with a resolution of quarter notes. We can now see a grid superimposed over the stereo sampled waveform. Only trouble is that the grid is set to 120 BPM. Our sample was 140 BPM, so let's set the BPM correctly. Now we can see each of these grid marks lining up properly with our sample. I could then take this loop point and confidently move it to, say, this point here. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'd have a loop exactly a measure long. Or else, say, 2 beats long. Or even just a quarter note. An easy way for you to experiment with grid-based editing will be to resample combis with ARP-driven grooves, which you'll learn about in just a little bit. Now, the grid is also available in the sample edit page, and you can imagine how much fun you can have cutting and pasting within the guidelines of this grid. Time slicing is an incredible function that intelligently slices up a sample in pieces so that you can change its tempo without changing its pitch. It gives you complete control over sampled loops to help them fit the song that you want to use them in. From the Loop Edit page, go ahead and select Time Slice from the page menu here. The Triton Studio analyzes the sample for a moment and asks us what the bass tempo is and the number of beats, and if we press OK, finally places those slices across the keyboard. Now the lower the sensitivity here, the less slices it will make. The higher, the more slices it will make. Let's go ahead and set it at the default 25 here. Now here's where things really start to get interesting. Press Save, and you can see that we have the ability to time stretch the sample to a new BPM if desired. Then save those slices off to a program, automatically assign that program to a track in a song, and either create sequence events or an Rppr mapping of pattern events to play that loop back. Let's go ahead and select track here in, say, this song, song number 0 is fine, and press OK. Now we'll go to sequence and press play. Your Triton Studio has just done an amazing number of things right now. It has laid out all of those slices into a program and laid that program into the first track, set the tempo correctly, and recorded every key so that they seamlessly play back. And check it out, you can even change the tempo. Try doing that with a regular sampler. As we said at the top of this section, the open sampling system allows you to resample within program mode, combi mode, and sequence modes. Now this allows us to create new loops by playing, say, a program or a combi, or by capturing parts of our sequence tracks, for example. Let's start by capturing an ARP-driven drum groove in program mode. Select program mode, and we'll go to number 004, Tricky Kit, and go to the sampling screen. Now we don't need to worry about the top of the screen here. These settings are for sampling external audio through the inputs, and we're going to be digitally resampling the Triton Studio itself. You'll notice that sampling is already set to note on. That's a good thing. Sampling will be initiated by me playing the keyboard. Under the page menu, select Bank and Sample Number, and let's place this sample into a new program and place it into the very last one. I think it's E127, because I know this one is blank, it's not already being used. Make sure to remember that program location. We'll go ahead and press OK. Let's go ahead and arm sampling. Press Start. Turn the Arpeggiator on, and it's waiting for me to play. Let's go ahead and record. Okay, hit stop and turn the Arpeggiator off. Now let's go back to the Performance Edit tab and select program number E127. You can hear that my whole performance has been recorded with effects and real-time moves and placed onto one key. Of course, you could resample again using more effects. To resample in combi mode, the concept is the same. Go to combi mode and select 032 for this example, School of Funk. Let's select the Sampling tab, and as you can see, sampling is set to start with a note on, just like before. Let's go into the page menu here and select a program to place this sample into. 126, that's fine. Okay, let's do it. Press record and start. Cool. Press program and let's go into the program that we just selected to sample into. Here's the combination that we just sampled. All those notes that we recorded, the drums, everything else, down to just 2 notes since we resample in stereo. This really helps with polyphony. So far I've been showing you how to resample within the Triton Studio in these different modes, but you can also sample external audio while in program or combi modes. So for example, you could be playing the keyboard while you're sampling external audio. You might want to do this so you could have, say, an ARP-driven drum pattern going to give you tempo and maybe a cool groove to play along with, or to play piano to give a singer a reference pitch and chord progression. To do that, you would just route the audio input here to end up coming out of one of the individual outputs, and then change your sampling source down here from left to right to individual 1 and 2. And we'll cover this in detail in the Master Series guide, or you can read up on it in your parameters guide. But if you want the ultimate in sampling along with a reference, check out the in-track sampling feature. Here's a sequence that I've been working on, and I'd like to lay down a real bass guitar on top of it. From this main sequencer page, select the Sampling tab, and we can see that here's our analog input that I plugged my bass into. Now your first impulse might be to assign it to the left and right bus and bring that into your sampler. But that would record all of the sequenced parts within the Triton Studio as well, because they would be on the left and right bus too. That's how you resample, as we've already learned. In-track sampling is actually sampling while in sequencer mode, so let's bring it to the individual output 1 and 2 and have the sampler look at that bus too. Now to actually monitor my bass, you'll need to take the individual output, number 1, and connect it to your mixer or monitoring system. In a pinch, you could always take the right output and switch it over. That way you'd have the sequence tracks going into your left speaker and the part you're recording into the other. Once the routing has taken place, I'll go ahead and set the sampling mode to mono, and then go up to the page menu here and select the bank and sample number. Now in sequencing mode, we have a very interesting addition on the bottom here where we get to place our sample in a track. It's grayed out right now, but we'll see it in a second. Now, as far as putting this in a program, I'll go ahead and place that into bank E, which is mostly blank for our sampling fun. I'll go ahead and select E120 as the program that I'm going to sample into, and then what track I'm going to record into. Let's go ahead and select number 16 and OK. Now you can see that sampling is set to begin here with the sequencer start stop. I could have set this to sampling start switch if you wanted to punch in while a song is playing, but since I'm going to be playing with both hands, this works fine with me with the sequencer start stop. Let's go ahead and arm the sampler and adjust levels. Okay, that looks about right. Let's go ahead and press sampling start stop, and the sampler will wait for the sequencer to start. Okay, here we go. Great, let's play that back. What has just happened here is the studio has sampled my playing, placed that sample into a program, put that program into track 16 here, here's E120, remember we did that? And place the proper timing right within this track to start playing the sample at the right place. Pretty cool, huh? Let's go ahead and add another part. I'll go back to the Sampling tab and go to the Page menu and select Bank and Sample Number. And you'll notice something totally cool here. Do you see how all the settings have remained, but the original key here has advanced 1 semitone? That way, every time I add a new overdub, these samples that I've recorded will keep playing. I can do this over 128 times in the same track if I wanted to. I'll keep it here at C#. Go ahead and press OK, arm the sampler, and start the sequence. So we now have a song using the internal drums on track 1 and a real bass on track 16 here. And of course you could add more MIDI parts, live vocals or anything else until this song is ready for mixdown, and the sampling page is where that takes place too. Only this time I do want to feed my sampler the left and right bus, so I can mix this down to a stereo file to internal hard disk. And because we've selected disk as the destination, the page menu selection that normally says select bank and sample now says select directory. You see, we're saving to disk. Let's go ahead and go down into our test folder here, and you can name that if you like. We'll hit done. Go ahead and arm the sampling process and start it. It won't start until the sequencer is started over here. Go ahead and let's play. And all of this information is being recorded to our internal hard drive as a stereo wave file, and we can even do a fade at the end. Now we won't hear this actual fade, but it's being done digitally to the wave file right now. Press sample and stop, and you can go ahead and stop the sequencer too. Now we have a wave file with a fade on our hard drive. Check it out. Press disk, and we'll find this file down the bottom here. Here we go, take number 000 wave. And as it says on the screen here, your sampling start and stop button will audition this file right from your hard drive. Now let's learn how to turn that into an audio CD. Place a blank CDR in the internal CD writer and press disk and go to Make Audio CD. Let's go ahead and press End and Insert, and we'll navigate to the file that we want to place on this CD. There you go, it's the guy right here. We can go ahead and hit Insert, and you can keep on repeating this for all the tracks you wish to place on the CD. And then finally, hit Exit, and then select Write to CD from the page menu. And keep in mind that you can bring in WAV files from your PC or Mac CD burner or even through Scuzzy. The Triton Studio will welcome them as long as they are either 44.1 or 48K files. It will then auto-convert the sample rate to 44.1 when burning the CD, so you don't have to worry about a thing. Now, if you wish to finish the disc so that you can play it back on any ordinary CD player, then you can go ahead and finalize at this time too. In-track sampling makes the Triton Studio a complete audio workstation in the true sense of the word. It's perfect for adding real instruments and vocals to music, and resampling in sequencer mode allows you to keep reusing effects to bounce multiple MIDI tracks to samples to give you virtually unlimited polyphony. It's especially helpful when you use the 6-voice MOS engine, since you can keep reusing it. Global mode allows you to make settings that affect the entire Triton Studio. Press the global key and the menu key, and you can see that we have a choice of 7 pages. Go ahead and press 0 basic setup. And one thing you need to know about the global mode is that settings must be saved or they'll be lost when you power down. From the page menu button, go ahead and hit Write Global Settings. This will store all your global settings here. Now on the basic setup page we have master tune and transpose and our velocity and aftertouch curves. If you ever want to change the feel of the keyboard, you can go ahead and select a different velocity curve. One will give you the broadest range of velocity for greater dynamics, where setting 8 has very little dynamics, kind of like the feel of an organ. 4 is the normal setting. We have global effect bypasses and checkboxes here that set whether arpeggios are loaded with programs or combis. We have some system preferences which include the beep enable and also a setting to decide what screen your Triton Studio wakes up in. The input sampling tab gives us some settings that are crucial to using your vocoder or running audio through the effects and sampling. When using the vocoder, always route your microphone into the right bus. You can always look at the reference manual on page 233 for further details. If you have the MLAN option installed, you'll have a couple of tabs of settings here. The MIDI page contains all of your global MIDI settings. You'll need to explore these if you're going to be using your Triton Studio with an external computer sequencer. The next page is for your foot pedals, etc. If you're going to be using a non-Korg damper pedal, its settings may be reversed. You can change the polarity of the damper right here. In the user scales page, you can set up your own tunings for each key here, or copy a number of preset ones from the page menu here. Under the category name page, you can set your own names for the categories in both the programs and the combis. Drum kits is where you can edit and create new drum kits and their mappings and routings. And similarly with the arpeggios, here's where you can create your own. There's too much to go through now, however we discuss these in detail in the Master Series video. Stay tuned at the end of this tape for details on how you can pick one up. The Triton Studio is rich in expansion capabilities, from sample RAM to an incredibly powerful DSP synth engine and cutting-edge digital I/O options. Here's the rundown. You can expand the sampling capabilities of your Triton Studio by placing additional SIM modules in the expansion bay. We have 3 slots for sample RAM, the first being filled with a 16 megabyte SIM that came from the factory. You can add 2 more 32 megabyte SIMs to take you out to 80 megabytes, or you can replace the 16 megabyte one and place 32 megabytes in all 3 for a maximum of 96 megabytes. EXB PCM boards are an exciting way to add more core sounds to your Triton Studio. You can add up to 7 boards, each providing an additional 16 megabytes of wave ROM within these available slots, for a total of 160 megabytes of onboard sounds. Once an EXB PCM board has been installed, you must load the corresponding programs and combis that use the added PCM data. Since the Triton Studio has so many additional banks available compared to the Triton Classic, I want to reroute the new sounds into one of these banks. Let's show you how to do this. For this example, I've installed the PCM02 Studio Essentials board. Now I need to place the disk that came with that board in the floppy disk drive and get into disk mode. Select the floppy disk from the pop-up menu here and highlight either of the PCG folders. They're identical. I'll use Bank C for this lesson. Now choose Load Selected from the page menu. Now here's the key to rerouting the data. Notice here on the screen that it says PCG Contents All. If I load it this way, I'll actually load up banks A, B, and C all to internal locations, and that's not what I want to do. So if I highlight the All, I can open it up and see the choice of what bank I want to load from the file. Now all I need is the new data, which is in bank IC, and we'll go ahead and select that. Now we can select the destination bank by pressing the To field. Let's pick EXB A for this example and then press OK. Now the Studio will load up the C bank programs, combinations, ARPs and drum kits if needed, and fix everything so that it all just works. That was easy. You can expand your Triton Studio with a cutting-edge DSP synth engine called the EXB MOS. This board has 13 different digital synthesis and physical modeling algorithms, which is a very technical way of saying this is the type of synthesizer that can make the most amazing sounds you've ever heard. From FM style cutting basses to huge analog style lead sounds. And even physical models of real instruments that go way beyond traditional sampling. Install a MOS synth engine under the hood and have the sounds you need that'll put you ahead of the game. If you want to hear audio examples of the MOS synth engine or any of the other EXB PCM boards, point your browser to www.korg.com. And finally, you can add I/O boards to give you 6 channels of digital audio out using the ADAT optical format in the EXB DI, or cutting-edge MLAN, which combines high-speed MIDI and audio. These exciting output options will allow you to connect in any environment. The Triton Studio is an amazing set of tools that work seamlessly together to make the most powerful production tool ever produced. This video tutorial was designed to get you up and running on your new instrument quickly. If you need to review anything that we've gone over up to this point, use the included index card and shuttle the tape to the corresponding counter location. If you wish to take your Triton Studio skills to the max, stay tuned for some more information about the Master Series video manuals. Hi, my name is David Wells, and since you've just graduated from learning how to get around your new Triton Studio, I'd like to invite you and challenge you to check out the Master Series video to get your skills up to the next level. Now, you've probably already realized that this is an entire production studio, as well as being an incredibly expressive instrument. All this to say, there are lots of production tricks and specialized techniques that you can employ to get the most out of your Triton Studio. And in fact, a lot of these we've picked up from speaking to users just like you as we do clinics all over the world. The Master Series tape is a collection of all of these techniques, as well as in-depth demonstrations of some of the features that we can only really scratch the surface on in the tape that was included with your Triton Studio. It's also a little bit more conversational, kind of like this in nature, versus the traditional video tutorial. I encourage you to pick up the Master Series tape. You can look for it at your local Korg dealer, or you can always check the website at www.korg.com. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you on the Triton Studio Master Series tape. Put on your jacket.